Hi, and welcome back to this month's recipe segment. My name is Kelly Burgess, and I'm the Family Consumer Sciences Extension Agent with the University of Kentucky Extension Service in Allen County. Today, we're going to be making an awesome recipe called smashed potatoes. And if you've heard of twice-baked potatoes, it'll kind of put you in mind of that. But of course, we like to put a little bit of a fun and healthy twist on things, so we'll be doing it just a little bit different today to get started. I'm going to go ahead and turn on my burner just to heat up and go ahead and add my olive oil. Once again, as usual, usually I demonstrate making half of the recipe, but I'll tell you the amounts for the full recipe so that you'll know what you would need to purchase at the grocery store should you decide to make this at home. So let's go over a little bit about our ingredients. Of course, we are going to need some baking potatoes. We'll talk a little bit more about potatoes and the different varieties and uses for them. We'll also need spinach, mushrooms, and green onions as our other produce items. And then as far as other yummy things that we're going to be mixing in today, we have shredded cheddar cheese, sour cream, low-fat sour cream, I should say, salt, pepper, and Dijon mustard. So it's pretty simple ingredients, mostly things that you might have at home other than your produce items. So you just saw me put a little bit of olive oil in this skillet. That would be 1 tablespoon, and we're going to heat that on about medium-high. Next, we're going to go ahead and add our 3/4 cup of chopped mushrooms. These are fresh mushrooms. And actually, I misspoke. It's 1.5 cups. I'm confusing myself with my half recipe here. So 1.5 cups of mushrooms. And I chose to chop them up just a little bit instead of them being whole, because when we stuff everything back in our potatoes, the smaller the shape of them are, the more easily they're going to fit into our potato shells, as you can see. So this is just kind of getting started with our little vegetable saute, but the steps that I've already done, I'd also like to tell you about that. So I have already baked these potatoes, as you'll notice, and have scraped out 2 of them. So we want to leave about 1/4 inch of the flesh or the inside of the potato inside that shell, just to help it to keep its structure and stability when we bake it for the second time. So as I mentioned, these are baking potatoes or russet potatoes. These are what you typically think of a baked potato if you order it in a restaurant, and they do have some unique qualities. So these types of potatoes are more starchy and have less moisture, as opposed to the waxy varieties of potatoes, things like the red, the yellow, the white, the Yukon Gold potatoes. Those have a higher moisture and a lower starch content, which makes them hold their shape better. So if you've ever seen roasted potatoes, or maybe mixed in with a roasted vegetable mixture, something like a potato salad, where you really want that potato to hold its shape well, you want to use those waxier varieties. But since these potatoes don't need to hold their shape today, this is why we're using the russet variety. You can see already from the ones that I have scraped out, they get to be fluffy, and they're great for the mashed potatoes and things like that, that we don't really need it to hold its potato shape. So I'll do a little bit of a demonstration to show you how I created these sliced off potatoes while our mushrooms are cooking. These probably need to go for about 6 minutes once it gets heated up. We will be able to hear and smell them once they're ready for the next step. So while that's cooking, we want to go ahead and slice off the top. The recipe says about 1 inch. I think we can get away with a little bit less than that as to not waste our potato. And what I'm going to do, I think just a regular spoon works the best for this. I'm going to scooch these to the side a little bit so I have plenty of room to scrape into my mixing bowl. And you'll notice this bowl is a lot larger than what I need for just the inside of the potatoes, but that's because we're going to be adding all of these other ingredients in as well. So I like to try and keep my messes to a minimum and also keep my dishes to a minimum. So the more that I can prevent that and use 1 bowl instead of 5, I'm all about doing that and sharing those tips with you. So the great thing about this recipe, you might have heard before or in the past that all of the nutrients for a potato are in the skin. And while the skin does offer some great health benefits, such as fiber, when you eat the skin of the potato, that makes it a good source of fiber. We do also have several nutrients that are found inside the potato. Things like vitamin B, vitamin C, and potassium. So we hope that you eat the skins, but even if you choose not to eat the skins, you're still getting a great nutrition package from your potatoes. Especially those maybe with diabetes or some other health conditions, if you're watching your carbohydrate intake. Potatoes have kind of been gotten a bad reputation for being really high in carbs or really high in starch. But the truth is, the kind of carbohydrates that we have in potatoes are complex carbohydrates, which just means that they're bigger, the actual sugars are bigger, and it takes more time for them to break down in your body. So these really are not going to raise your blood sugar as quickly as it would something like a piece of candy. So while it does ultimately convert down to sugar, not all carbohydrates are created equal, I like to say. So you can see hopefully that this is nice and scraped out, and we're going to just add this back. I can scrape a little bit more from this top part because we're not really going to use these tops. They'll be discarded. Whoops. We have our potatoes ready, and I'm starting to smell my mushrooms. So I'm going to give them a little bit more of a stir. We'll let them go for just a few more moments on their own. And I'm going to go ahead and set up my baking sheet. So I've arranged these potatoes on a plate, but we are going to bake them on 400 degrees for about 25 minutes. Of course, as all good things, we are going to top them with cheese. So that's a good indicator for when they'll be finished, when that cheese starts to turn that nice, crispy, crunchy, golden brown. So now that my mushrooms have started to cook, I'm going to go ahead and add my green onions. This is 4 green onions. And I did the whole onion, the bottom, the white part, and the top, or the chives, as you would typically hear at a restaurant. I like all of it, and so we are just going to go ahead and not waste anything and put all of that in. And then 6 ounces of fresh spinach. Now you might think, how on earth is this going to fit inside a potato with all of these other ingredients? Well, the good news is when we saute things with heat, that spinach is going to shrink to be a lot less of the volume of its fresh. So we're going to add this to our pan, and you'll be amazed at how much it shrinks down, and we will in fact be able to get that inside our potatoes. So I'll just give this a little stir to get that spinach down closer to our heat. And while our saute pan is finishing up, we are going to work on mashing our potatoes a little bit. It's not important that they're super fine or super finely mashed, as maybe it would be if you were just going to eat mashed potatoes, but we do want the clumps to be broken down, kind of like how I mentioned with the mushrooms. The smaller the particles, the easier it's going to be to fit that back inside of our potatoes again. Just another little tip on ingredients. I mentioned that we're using low-fat sour cream inside our mixture. But another option that would work quite well is non-fat plain Greek yogurt. You might have heard that substitution in several other recipes before, and it will also work great for this recipe. So if you don't have that sour cream on hand at home, or if you want to add a little extra punch of protein, feel free to go ahead and use that non-fat Greek yogurt instead. So let's get this turned up just a little higher to get our spinach sauteing down. And I love this recipe because it's a great one that you can add to really any type of meat or protein option for a meal. It's going to be very filling. You'll see when you get to eat that whole potato with all of these awesome veggies inside. Maybe you choose to have it with a lean beef steak or some baked chicken. You could also do with a pan seared pork chop. So there's lots of options that we have for this recipe. And this is the perfect thing for January in our winter months. Potatoes are in season and they store well. So that's a great thing to have in the wintertime when there's not as many other fresh vegetables available here in Kentucky. So this is almost finished. I'm going to go ahead and add in our other ingredients. So we're going to add in our 3/4 cup of sour cream, low fat. We'll get this filling ready. I can smell the mushrooms and the onions. It's a great, you can tell it's going to be a yummy recipe. We have 1 cup of shredded cheddar cheese. However, I'm going to save just a little bit of that to sprinkle on top of our potatoes, as I mentioned. 2 teaspoons of Dijon mustard, just to give it a little bit of a flavor. And 1/4 teaspoon each of salt and pepper. I went ahead and had those mixed in, so we'll just leave those there. I'm going to go ahead and get this mixture combined, and then we'll simply add our veggies and stuff the shells. So this looks like some awesome fluffy mashed potatoes right now, but it's going to be even better once we add in those greens. So this is kind of an all-in-one, you have your starchy vegetable and your green vegetable as the perfect side dish to a meal. Or you could even make it a meal, honestly, maybe for a light lunch. All right, so our spinach, you can see, has become significantly smaller than what it was when I first placed it in the pan. And so it is finished and ready to be added to our potato mixture. So let's go ahead and add this to our large mixing bowl. And now you can see why we chose this large mixing bowl instead. So we'll put that over here, continue with our mixing. And this is going to smell great when you combine the cheese, the creaminess, and of course our green vegetables. Now it's up to you how you want to put this back in the shells. If you are skilled, you might be able to do it with your spatula. However, I feel like it is easier to use that regular spoon that you would maybe eat soup with instead, just to get it in all the little nooks and crannies of your potatoes. So there's our mixture ready to go. And I'm going to return back to my spoon, as I mentioned. And so you'll probably have to pick up your potato shells and work on stuffing that mixture in. It doesn't hurt to give it a little extra love, because you want to get as much of that goodness down inside as you possibly can. It's okay for it to be mounded up over the top a little bit, because we have added some extra things, and so it's not likely to all fit in there just perfectly. So I realized that I failed to mention how we baked our potatoes originally. It just took 1 hour on 400 degrees. Before we baked them, we sprayed them with non-stick cooking spray. Instead of rubbing with salt and oil, that's a little bit of a healthier alternative there for our baking step in the process. And then also poke them with a fork. So I like to put them on a cookie sheet for that step also, but I line my cookie sheet with aluminum foil. It just makes for a little bit less cleanup and a little bit less mess. So feel free to do that as well. All right, try and put a little bit more on this one. And that's a step that you can even do the night before if you think that you won't have a full hour and then extra time to do the steps that you've seen today and bake again. You can go ahead and have your potatoes made and then follow up with these steps for a quicker prep on the night of your dinner with your smashed potatoes. I think that the smashed is a great name for them. I don't know if it's because it has spinach and mushrooms in addition to mashed potatoes, but they definitely are going to be quite the treat. So I think I have loaded as much filling as I can back into these potatoes, and this doesn't have to go to waste. Your mixture, you can simply heat it up and eat it like mashed potatoes, or if you have extra shells, maybe you kept those little skins that you cut off the top, and you can stack those up and eat them as well. So let's go ahead and sprinkle with our cheese. This is how we're going to know that they are done, and it's fine to just go ahead and pat that down a little bit so that it stays on. Alrighty. So these are our smashed potatoes, and as we always say, By the magic of TV, we'd love to show you what the finished product looks like after we bake these at 400 for about 20 to 25 minutes to get that cheese nice and golden brown. So if you're interested in this recipe, which we hope that you are, you can find it by emailing barry.hyatt@nctc.com. You can also search plateitup.ca.uky.edu, or you can find Plate It Up Kentucky Proud on Facebook for this recipe and so many others. Once again, thanks for joining us for our monthly recipe segment. Make sure you come and catch us next time.